Hey, marketing rebels. Welcome back to Alt Marketing School, a show teaching you how to make marketing more impactful, human, and fun. It's Fab here, your marketing BFF and a teacher at Alt Marketing School. And today I am joined by the one and only Jen, who is now live with us.
Yes.
And one thing that I learned about Jen, and I want you to tell me a bit more about this, is that you are a generator 1-3 in human design, which means you are a blend between an investigator and a martyr. Can you tell me a bit more about that as we're kicking off this conversation totally about LinkedIn? I'm going to sidetrack us already. I want to know more
Yeah.
about your human design profile.
Yeah, I got into human design probably about 2 years ago. I heard about it in a networking event. A lot of ladies were like, "What's your design?" And I was like, "What the hell does that mean?" So I had my kind of profile read. So I found out I was a generator 1-3. And there's basically five different types of people. Generators are probably the most common. About 30%. Then you've got something called a manifesting generator, which is about 30% as well. Then you've got a manifester, which is 9%. A reflector is 1%. And what was the other one? Um, there's another one I can't remember. But anyway, generators are built to work. We're kind of like the workhorses and we're really good at doing stuff, but obviously you can burn out when you're a generator. I think a lot of the marketing advice out there is geared at manifestors who are just really good at doing it, whereas a generator needs to feel a bit more aligned and they're really good in response to something, whereas a manifester is like really good at initiating. And I think, yeah, a lot of the marketing out there is like, just do it, just do it, just do it. But the majority of people are built to be in response to something, so they're really good at Q&As, things like this, answering questions, as opposed to just starting something off. So for me, everybody gets two numbers in your profile. They mean two different lines. So for me, the one means an expert. So I kind of like, and it makes sense because I like to go deep and I'm only on LinkedIn. So I'm all about that. And then the 3 is all about investigating and tinkering and trial and error, and which is something really useful for a business owner because it is all about trial and error and failing and starting again, failing and starting again. So yeah, like I can give basic human design readings, but I'm not like a human design expert or anything. But I find it fascinating because when I learned all about mine, I was like, that explains why some things are really hard for me. And it also explains why I like things like this, like a Q&A, or if someone asks me questions online for an interview, love it. Anything where I'm in response, I really love. But if you say to me to just initiate something, it feels hard, unless it's something I really love. So for me, the 1 in 3 is all about do market research, really exploring before I take any action. And yeah, I think on LinkedIn, a lot of people are fellow generators or manifesting generators. It's about 60-70%, I think, in total that are built to respond. And then everything else is like, just do it, just do it.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. And I can tell that it was definitely a topic that you were really into. And just in case you don't know what human design is, obviously this is a live podcast. So we've got some people live that were also like, oh, what is this? Just to give you the short version of it, is a system that combines various ancient sciences, like including even things like astrology as well, Vedic philosophy. And what it does, it basically kind of gives you some personalizing insights in you, how you like to work. I mean, this is the simplest way to explain it. It is just like some of us love to do personality tests. This is another way to
Yeah.
understand better who you are and how you work, right? And I love the fact that you said that because you're passionate about it, you've started to see actually some patterns as well of the people that show up on LinkedIn. And in general, I think, as you say, like a lot of people that actually are marketers seem to kind of like be predisposed to have some of these traits and kind of to fall under some of these brackets as well. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about today as well is that actually when we think about who we are and how we show up on LinkedIn is so much about conversations and connections and relationships. And I think that's a big side of LinkedIn. And for so much time, and for so many ways, we talk about obviously the posting side of it, the commenting, the DMing, the conversations. But it's interesting because LinkedIn has other features, has other things that we can tap into if we want to, and that we can explore. And just to show Jen as well, you can tell me what you think about what you see here. We asked our people live that joined us live, what is the feature that they would like to dip their toes into next when it comes to
Okay, cool.
LinkedIn. You see, this is the vibe. So 2 votes on live, we've got 3 votes on events, and 7 votes on newsletter. Not
Okay.
some people are going to come in and be like, no, events too. It's shifting, but roughly we're looking at this. What are some of your thoughts when you look at this?
It's good. It's good to see that people are interested. I do think it all depends. Like I love all three, and I think for me the reason why I love them is because they're the way to get the quickest leads I found on LinkedIn. Whereas general posts on the home feed, it's a cumulative effect. It can take quite some time. It can take, even if you're the best copywriter, the best marketer, it can take, a few months, for some people a few years to get traction. Whereas if you do like a live event, people are engaged with you. And I know I've done quite a few lives with my clients, and my recent client Susan, she got 6 sales calls from just a live, a quick, half-hour chat. And that would have taken a bit longer with content on the home feed. Events I love because you can do a LinkedIn Live with an event page and just help to promote it. Or it could be something like this, a live podcast or a webinar or a summit. So you can attract your people to you quicker. And then you've got those leads. So people self-select really with an event and say, oh, I want to go to that. Whereas I think with our content, a lot of people love our content, but they don't engage. There's a lot of lurkers or scammers or skimmers, people kind of reading but not engaging with us. Whereas events, they will come to you way quicker. And the newsletter I just love because it's longer form content, and I like to think more intelligent content, and there's a bit more meat to it. So I know I've definitely got some really good quality leads and some clients from all three. And I think unless you're really talented with copywriting or marketing, it is a long game on the home feed. Whereas the good news is if you're not really talented with copywriting or marketing, you can attract people to you quicker with any of the other three. So I'm all about the quick wins. I don't want to be posting on LinkedIn waiting for years to get traction. So that's why I love them. And I find most of my clients, the odd one is good at marketing, but most of them are not, and it's not their bag. And a lot of them are sole traders or, very small companies, maybe a VA, but they don't necessarily have the money to outsource to a copywriter. So they're relying on their content, which is not really cutting through, and they're not really doing the things that move the needle in terms of creating conversations, building relationships, getting people on sales calls. So yeah, I think there's a lot of hype about content alone on the home feed is where the magic happens, but the magic really ultimately happens in the back end, in the DMs. That's how you're going to create that conversation and take it offline. So yeah, I'm all about the three. It's whatever works for people and their personality. Some people listening will be a fellow introvert and think, I don't want to go live. And that's fine. If you want to do a newsletter, brilliant. There's brilliant newsletters out there. Events, they can be online events, real life events. It's just a great way to get traction, but there's no one size fits all. It's all what feels good for you, what you enjoy, because if you enjoy it, you're going to show up and do them again. If you do something and you hate it, you're not gonna be consistent.
I love this. And actually, I think that's a great way to then segue into breaking down, because there were already some questions. Again, people joining us live, lovely rebels joining us live today, especially about lives as well, interestingly enough, but also events and kind of when to promote things. So I was thinking about going through all these three and really exploring them, because you're actually giving us a
Yeah,
chance to explore features again that maybe we don't hear about enough when it comes to LinkedIn, and they are untapped for some, but we can see, as you give us example, that can be so powerful, maybe also because not everybody taps into them. So my
yeah,
first big beautiful little bubble is the live bubble. And I love that you mentioned about also understanding how you work, which we kind of kicked off with human design, funnily enough, but is understanding how you want to show up, right? And when it comes to lives, I think one of the things that I am wondering about is, how do we get started when it comes to this? How do we choose maybe what we should try or experiment with when it comes to our lives? Because a lot of people feel, can I go live on LinkedIn for 30 minutes and keep them hooked up for 30 minutes? Is this really
Yeah.
happening? Or do I have to make specific consideration when I go live on this platform?
Yeah, I know when I first started doing lives, I was like scared shitless because it's new tech. And I think with any new tech, you're a bit like, well, how is this going to go down? So I knew I would be a little bit nervous. So what I did for my first few lives is similar to this. I got guests on for interviews, and I did, I think, 5 interviews. So I was accountable because I'd invited a lady on, and it was like confirmed, it was in the diary, I couldn't back out. So I thought, let me do it that way. And and they all knew I was new to the tech, and they were quite happy to come on and explore with me. And it went well. They all went well. And I think, well, once I'd done a few of them, I was like, okay, because I think the biggest worry usually is the tech. And once I figured out it wasn't that, scary, I use StreamYard for all of my lives. I find it really easy tech. I'm not a techie person, but I can use StreamYard. And I got in the flow, and then I was happy to go like completely live by myself. But initially, I don't think I could have done it straight off a half an hour. It would have just felt a bit, yeah, icky for the first one. But yeah, I started off with guests, and it's all trial and error, just getting comfortable with the tech. And the big thing with a live is promoting the live, because it's not like a Facebook live or an Instagram live where you can just pop up and you might get some traction. With LinkedIn, you really need to let people know in advance that you're going live. Otherwise, it can just fall flat on the home feed. So for me, I would probably create a LinkedIn event page for my lives and just, really promote. And if I have a guest, the great thing about an event page is you can invite the guest onto the event page, and then you can both invite your network onto the live. So with any LinkedIn event, you can invite 1,000 of your first degree connections every 5 days. So if you are going live next week, so I can then invite 1,000. And if I've got a speaker like Fab, she can invite 1,000. So between the two of you, you can invite 2,000 first degree connections. And I find that's probably the biggest mistake people make with LinkedIn events. They create the event page and it looks amazing. I know I'm digressing, but they'll have amazing visuals, amazing brand, but then they never invite anyone actually onto the event page. So you see some really good events on LinkedIn with about 2 attendees, and I'm like, oh, what a shame, because they've not actually manually invited people on. So for any live, I would try and get as many eyeballs. So for lives with my clients, we tend to get between probably 100 and 200 people on them through using LinkedIn events. And in the past, I've hosted my own summit, and we got nearly 1,000 people onto the event page. So combining events with live is kind of like the dream team. Because on its own, if you just did a random live, unless you've got a super engaged audience, chances are with different time zones, people have stuff on, they're going to miss it. So yeah, it's all in the promotion.
I love that, because that's how I would envision using lives and events together. So it really resonates with me. I would have then, you know, anything that I can do to direct people that way. And I like that you segued into the event bit, because that was probably the question that I was going to lead to when it came to the events. So we're going to get back to that in a second.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that I love that we have different formats, and even just from the team that is live on the live version of the podcast, I see that some people are like, oh yeah, I could use the live for live podcast, or I could use the lives for Q&A and AMAs. And I think it can be a great opportunity also to then use it to promote a launch, or to bring awareness or education around something you're doing. And again, I feel that the tech, it can be a bit of a blocker for some people, because
Yeah.
some platforms allow you so easily to just go live by just clicking on, and then you open, and then just like Instagram, you can go live straight away. Whereas I think people on LinkedIn, they're not really sure what they have to do. But as you say, like
Yeah.
do you find that that's a block also for some of your clients? I know that you mentioned it also for yourself, you talked about
Yeah.
StreamYard works
Yeah.
as well.
It's definitely a block because it is a bit annoying that you have to use a third-party software to go live on LinkedIn. They don't have the bandwidth for you to just go live from the platform. So it's about figuring out what is the one to use. I think the two most popular are StreamYard and Restream, and it's a personal choice. So I would say to everyone today, if you're curious, go on both of them and see. You'll get a free trial on both and see which looks good for you, feels easiest. I love StreamYard. I find it really easy to navigate in the back end. And the great thing with StreamYard is you can go live on LinkedIn, but you can also, if you're on Facebook as well or YouTube, you can go live like simultaneously across them all. It's pretty easy when you set up your StreamYard account or your Restream to connect to you can connect to either your LinkedIn profile or your LinkedIn company page or both. And then you just decide when you go live which one you're going to go live from. So it's pretty easy to set it up. I know when I first started, like I said, I was terrified. So even though I wasn't on Facebook for business, I have my own like personal Facebook account. So I set up a group with just me in it, and I did a test where I streamed from StreamYard into the Facebook group because I was like, oh, let me try this before I make a fool of myself on LinkedIn. And it was really easy, to be honest. And I think the only thing that can go wrong really is Wi-Fi issues, and it's not the end of the world if you go live and it doesn't work. Like we started a little bit late today. It's not the end of the world as long as you get there in the end. But yeah, like StreamYard, I would happily recommend to everyone. The free version is great for starting off, and then if you want to look a bit more sexy with your branding, you just upgrade to the next version, and then you can have like your logo and your background. But if you're starting off even as a guest and you don't want to do your own live, maybe you'll look at us today and go, oh, I don't want to do mine, but I'd love to be a guest. Then the free version is perfect. You never need to worry about any of the branding.
I love that. And I just want to add another point to this. If you also, for example, some people chose live podcast as an example. If you do use platforms like Riverside, which is a platform that we use for our podcast, for example, and even Airmeet, which we're on today for this live podcast, a lot of them allow you very easily then to, for example, connect with LinkedIn and other platforms as well. So there's something to be said about if you already have a platform that you know does some sort of video recording or interview recording, look at what you already got, because it might be that actually also gives you that access to it. But yeah, StreamYard is the one that I've used the few times that I've used it myself. So, and I used it for free. It was a free session. It was a free, sorry, account. So that can be also a really good one for you to invest in and to look into as well. We've got a couple of questions on this. I want to actually bring one on stage and then I'll just ask for clarification on the other one before we jump onto a couple of things about events. So just to clarify, M asks, would you use a live, say 10 minutes before an event, or several lives leading up to an event, for example? What would be a good strategy when it comes to lives?
It's just promoting, really. So for me, it's having the event page. And what I usually do is I would get in touch with anyone who's signed on the event page. You can click on manage attendees and you can see them all. And I would ping them all a quick message. It could be an hour before, the day before, and just say, hey, thanks for signing up for my live tomorrow. I'd remind them where to go because LinkedIn Lives are not always intuitive to join. People are like, where do I click? Where do I go? And it's a case of bringing up somebody's profile, whether it's the desktop or the phone, and looking at their cover banner. And then they suddenly start to go live. Their cover banner changes into a live. So I message them all. It sounds laborious, but it's not really. It's a quick copy and paste that you can go to all of them. And it doesn't matter if they're not connected to you, if they're not a first degree connection, you can message them all because it's your event. So you can message them all for free. So it's a nice way to start a conversation as well. So I just quickly send a line or two. Great, looking forward to seeing you later or tomorrow. Don't forget, this is how you join. And yeah, it just reminds people where the hell to go. And then some people are like, yeah, looking forward to it. You're starting to chat. Other people are like, oh no, I can't make it. And then you just say, that's fine, I'll send you the replay after. So it's just a really nice way to start engaging with people. So yeah, I'd love to say there is a magic way to send one message to all attendees. There isn't. But I tend to put a comment on the event page, so it shows up at the top, kind of pin it and say, reminder, this is where you click to go, to see me going live. Because even though it's around a few years, it's not very intuitive and people still don't know where the hell to go.
I love that. I love it. That's actually like a really good point. And I think if you want to use lives to promote your events, whether it's external to LinkedIn or kind of all in the same space, though, I want to add one more note for I would also think about, there is something to be said about too much for your own good. So even if obviously not everybody's going to see your lives and not everybody's going to see your content, and then once you've done the live, I think it lives right in your feed. You can then rewatch it, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can always then say, I'm going to do one live to promote my event, maybe I would say a bit before the event. I wouldn't go as far as like too close to it. And then you can do some of the things that Jen mentioned closer to the event time.
Yeah.
And then you can always reshare that live or maybe just kind of bring it back as another way to promote it. So that's what I would say. Do that a bit further away from the event, maybe even the day before. Again, if it's free, especially, it's better to do closer to the event. And then maybe use some of Jen's strategies then to kind of bring awareness to the event itself. Again, I think that's another really good thing to do. One other question here from Charlie, which I love, is, I don't know why I said it that way, Charlie. By the way, if anybody remembers the YouTube video of Charlie the unicorn, let us know in the chat if you're live. If you're a dear listener listening, you might think about it too. Yeah, some people know Charlie the unicorn. If not, you're welcome. Go on YouTube. What's the benefit of hosting a LinkedIn live over an event on Zoom and sending it out to your newsletter? What would you say about that?
Ooh. I think lives are good for just kind of building a little bit of awareness. Whereas if I wanted more serious engagement, I would get people on a Zoom and I would use LinkedIn event page to push it. So for me, like even with clients, we've done a live and then the call to action at the end of a live has been plugging a webinar that's on Zoom. So the live's kind of like a warm up. It's people getting to know you, but you wouldn't like really, you can go deep on a live, but in general, people don't go that deep. So yeah, for me, if you wanted more serious engagement, I would always push to a Zoom and use the live just to kind of warm them up. So yeah, that's what I would do probably. And I think people are more, I don't know why, I work with a lot of introverts and they're more more confident when they're on Zoom because it's like private as opposed to, a live to all of the billion people on LinkedIn. But yeah, I find in general the lives, the call to action I would mainly use from a live would be join me on a webinar or DM me if this resonated, or maybe I could be sharing a lead magnet or something. But I would go deeper in terms of like lead gen from a Zoom. But you could share either with your email newsletter, and even if you use a LinkedIn newsletter, there's no reason why you can't embed LinkedIn live videos throughout your LinkedIn newsletter as well. I constantly kind of link back from newsletters to other newsletters or mention events in them. So yeah, they can all kind of point to each other. But yeah, I find in terms of like lead gen, I would try and get people on a Zoom more, just because it's more interactive. You can see them. When you do a LinkedIn live, of course people can comment, but you can't see them face to face. And some people with the tech, you can't actually see their name. They just show up as a LinkedIn user. Whereas on a Zoom, at least you can see who they are. They can come off the mic. You can have a more interactive like Q&A.
One more note that I will make, and I think that's a great breakdown and kind of explaining like the difference actually. One more benefit, if we just want to go with the benefit of a LinkedIn Live over something separate, is that if you're starting with that as well as the call to actions, which I think is super important, there's also the element of you're keeping people on the platform. And I think that's one of the things that's less resistant as the first, as you say, that warm up, that you talk about the warmer kind of warming up the leads. You're keeping people on the platform, which means you are reducing the resistance and the friction, because there will be friction as soon as you ask people to go somewhere else and do something else. And also is instant. So people, if they have the time, they can just kind of tune in to figure out what that is about and get the information they need. So that's another thing that I would say as well, something to think about. But I absolutely love that. And it kind of leads then to the event conversation. Yay. Which I think for me is one of the biggest mistakes that you see people do when it comes to setting up the LinkedIn events, aside from not inviting their own people, which we just talked about, which I think is so important. Aside from not inviting their connections, is there anything else that you see happening?
I think probably setting it up too late. Like, I would set it up at least a week or two before, whereas some people set it up like the day before. And it's like, it's not enough to kind of get people like on board. So yeah, not enough notice, I would say. Probably the visual that they use at the top isn't very clear or branded. Maybe the sizing is a bit off. So you can make the visual on Canva, like most visuals you can find out how to do over there. So I think getting the sizing of the image right is important, because then you can see it clearly with the thumbnail. And I know with some images I've not been able to actually read the text or really get the impact of the image. So that's, once you kind of have a template for the image, you can use it for every event. It's going to fit everyone. So I think just finding out what are the sizings and how can I make it look good, because that's the first impression, I think. So, and then I think the name, just keeping it short and snappy and clear, because I think a lot of people try and be clever on LinkedIn versus clear. And when you're like, keep it clear and simple, then you're going to attract a lot more people, because if it's confusing, you're not going to get as many people sign up. So I think, yeah, don't have like a big long title. That's a bit of a mouthful. Just kind of get to the point a bit quicker. So yeah, I would say it's kind of like the top part of the event. It's similar to a LinkedIn profile. It's about having a good banner, having a good like headline, and then people will read on. If you don't have that, then people will just be inclined to like move on, or not accept the invite. So you can't really go that far wrong with the rest of the setup. It's pretty easy. You just select whether it's a LinkedIn Live or an external event, put your link in. You've got a certain amount of characters for the description. If you've got any speakers, you invite them, they're on the page as well. So the actual setup of the event page is very easy. It doesn't take that long. But I would say the biggest mistake is the visual and the title. Some people choose confusing titles and you're like, what the hell? If they just stripped it back, it would just be so much better.
What would you say to somebody that actually made me think about somebody that might say to you, Jen, it's all well and good, but I feel like I'm harassing my people if I invite them to my event. So how can I do this? So how does this show up for them? She's nodding. So I'm pretty sure that more than one person that works with you has said that to you. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
resistances we have, is just to send it to as well.
Yeah, I think, and I get it. Lots of people will feel like they're bothering their network, especially if they're like empaths. So, thing is, you can't really influence how other people feel. So I know I used to be a lot more sensitive about LinkedIn at the start and worry about everything, but I just think your people will accept, and the people who don't want to will ignore, and that's fine. You're not going to make everyone love you on LinkedIn, and not everyone is going to want to come to your events, and that's fine. So yeah, you just can't take it personally. Like, I'm all about focusing on the people who engage with you, and if people don't engage, that's fine. But it's just about being brave. And I think if you're really hesitating, ask yourself, why are you hesitating? It's usually not a LinkedIn thing. Maybe you don't really believe in that event you're doing or that live. Maybe it's not exciting you. Maybe you need to go back and look at your why and connect a bit stronger to it. Because I think when you're more connected to your purpose, then you kind of get over those blocks. And I know if I fall out of love with one of my services or something I'm doing, I will block myself from marketing. And it's only when I dig deep that I go, I know I need to like do a spring clean. I'm not feeling it. So I would ask yourself why, because if you know you're coming from a good place and you've got a good intention and you've got an amazing live or an amazing event, just send it, and don't worry about it, because the right people will step forward who want it. And if people don't, you just can't take it personally. But I would just say don't block yourself, because other people will block you anyway, so don't kind of like give up on yourself before you even start, because if you don't invite people, then you could miss out on some amazing opportunities or some amazing ideal clients. So yeah, it's a hard one. It's all about putting yourself in the right mindset. And I know we were talking about human design at the start, and energy and how you feel. Get into that good state of mind. So when I go on LinkedIn, I don't just go on like at 9 a.m. because it's the morning, I have to go on then. I do it in a time where I feel good, whether it's, after a walk, or maybe I've done an aqua class or a Pilates. I feel a little bit more energetic, a bit more lively, and I put on some of my favorite music, have my diffuser going, some nice smells, get into a relaxed state of mind. Because I think a lot of people on LinkedIn are like, I need clients, or they're in scarcity mindset, and they're not really enjoying it when they're reaching out. But I think if you're kind of going on in a better state of mind, you won't be so kind of attached to the outcome. You'll be kind of living your purpose a bit more. So you ask yourself, when you go on LinkedIn now, do you even feel good at that time of day that you're doing it, or does it feel like a chore?
I love that. And I think that's one of the problems sometimes that we have when it comes to understanding how to navigate like our LinkedIn, and especially some of the features that maybe put ourselves a bit more forward, even if it is DMs. And so I think it's a great point that you made that too. And actually, maybe the slightly how can I say, gentle way to kind of move around this is also thinking about other features like a newsletter that is still more broadcasting necessarily than maybe asking for something or going live, but still I find can have its own challenges as, and I think that's really important to mention. Also, I love that Kathy also said, I love when Jen is saying mindful marketing. Yes, it's like market to hearts, human marketing, what we teach. I love it. That's obviously why we invited Jen to talk, because we have a very similar ethos when it comes to the way that we think about how we put ourselves forwards too. I think it's really important that you mentioned that. So newsletters, as I said, maybe not as much about asking all the time, a bit more about broadcasting. But I think
Yeah.
we already have some questions in the chat about newsletters, but I'm going to kick us off first with a bit of a preamble here, which is how can we use newsletters? Let me explain. LinkedIn newsletters are a type of newsletters, but some of us might already have our newsletters. Some of us might already think about how should I start it here? Should I start it somewhere else? So I'm also going to put a little poll for everybody live if you want to tell us what you think, and then ask Jen as well. How can people use newsletters? How have you actually, maybe even before your clients, been using LinkedIn newsletters for yourself, and how have you been seeing it successful for you?
Do my little vote. Oh, I like it. 75%, but that's what I voted as well.
So when it comes to you, how are you using it, Jen?
Um, I work with a lot of people who do their own like email newsletters, and I think if you're spending the time on creating a good newsletter for your email, why not repurpose it on LinkedIn? It doesn't have to be drastically different, and you're going to have a different audience on LinkedIn. I do send emails, but I don't actually send an email newsletter. So my main newsletter on LinkedIn, I selected monthly when I set it up. You can either have like a daily one, a weekly, a bi-weekly, a monthly. I think monthly is the furthest. So I thought, well, let me do that because there's more chance of me being consistent. And of course, if you want to do more than every month, you could do bonus newsletters. So yeah, I do one a month, and to be honest, sometimes it is about every 6 weeks or 8 weeks. So mine are a bit more in depth, they're long, but they're great resources for me to share again and again and again, because I do get asked the same questions again and again and again. So they're really good kind of lead gen magnets for me. If somebody has a question about events, I've got a newsletter on that. If they have a question about newsletter, I've got a newsletter on that, or lives, I've got a newsletter on that. So yeah, I love them. I just think people self-select if they want to subscribe to it. There's no pressure. I think I've nearly 8,000 subscribers on mine now, and I think the reason why I love a newsletter over an individual LinkedIn article is because when you do an individual LinkedIn article, it's like any content on the home feed and you're not guaranteed really any views. Whereas when you set up your first LinkedIn newsletter, the first one that you send out is sent to all of your first degree connections and they're asked if they want to subscribe. So it's a really good way to get eyeballs on your content. But yeah, I know some really good weekly ones, some really good bi-weekly ones. It's whatever works for you. I don't really know anyone doing a daily one when I think about it, and that is just such a commitment. I would want to do that, but yeah, it's whatever works for you. You know, like for me, the monthly one is easy, and I will have like resources in the bottom of mine, you know, whether it's an event coming up or my lead magnet, anything like that. So yeah, I love it. So you can have short ones, long ones. Some people embed videos in there, some people embed graphics, some people just have text. It's really what works for you, and your people will follow it, you know, if they're interested in the topic. So you're not going to get everybody into it, but if it's a topic that they're interested in, so mine's on, surprise, surprise, LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm just a big fan. So I think if you've already got your own newsletter, or you know, you're writing something once a week, why not repurpose it? You don't need to create, you know, reinvent the wheel and create something brand new. So if you do like writing or long form content, then absolutely explore them. It's so worth it.
I love that, because that was going to be my next question, was actually going to be about how do I know what makes sense for my strategy. A lot of people, actually the majority of people, voted I want to use newsletters on LinkedIn to complement my existing newsletter. I think you gave us a great, almost like get out of jail free card. If you wanted to do that and you already have a newsletter, maybe you just repurpose some of it or like some elements of it. I think that can be really powerful too. It's interesting that only one person voted to actually use LinkedIn for a separate newsletter. But I
Yeah.
think, again, sometimes we struggle. Like, again, somebody actually voted for not sure what makes sense in my strategy. So I think sometimes we feel maybe I could tap into this, but I don't know how to do it without maybe doubling my work or making
Yeah.
things more complex for me. We actually had a question here about we got two. So I'm gonna start with actually the one about the length in the copy. They're both from Kathy. So the first one is like optimal length for a copy for these kind of newsletters. Long, short. Is there a pattern? Is there not?
Yeah, I would say don't do it too short, because sometimes I click on some people's newsletters and I'm like, this isn't a newsletter. This is just like a mini post. It's like there's no kind of value. So it should be slightly longer than the post that you would do like in your general home feed, but it doesn't have to be like super long. Have a look at one of mine after. They are long, but there are ones out there that are like half the size. It's up to you, but I would just say don't have it too short, because I literally have seen some that are like 3 lines, 4 lines, or actually they're plugging an event on Eventbrite or something, and I'm like, this is not a newsletter. It's just like a link to a, you know, something else. Like, but yeah, it's a little bit meatier than your regular kind of posts, you know. There's a bit more substance to it, and I find it's not that I'm not proud of my like posts on my home feed, but I'm super proud of my newsletters because I've put a bit more effort into them. So I'm happy to share them again and again and again. And they've all got their own separate URL link, so they can be like indexed by LinkedIn or Google. So they're really good for SEO as well. So yeah, I like to think of them more as kind of like thought leadership pieces, as opposed, I mean, you can be a thought leader in your general content, but you can just put a lot more meat and it go a bit deeper in a newsletter, and it's fine because people expect it to be a little bit longer than a general post. But yeah, don't do it too short.
One super quick question. There's another one from Kathy about promotion, which I think might have a few more bits to talk about. We've got time for a few more questions, by the way, team, just in case we're coming up to time. So this is super quick though, so I think it's more of a yes or no. But Caroline, hi Caroline, is asking whether you can when you create the LinkedIn newsletter, can you actually preview the newsletter before you published it?
When you have it in draft, you can have a look, you know, it's all in draft. And the great thing is, well, LinkedIn newsletters, they are a bit confusing, I will say, because people listening today, if you don't have one, you will be thinking, where the hell do I go to click to actually create this bloody thing? So I'll quickly tell people, like on the home feed, which is, you know, when you've got the little house icon, the first box on the very top, if you have to click write an article to go through to that kind of back end of where you create either an individual article or your newsletter. And once you go in and you select newsletter, the kind of the way they're set up, an article or a newsletter is the exact same. They look the exact same. So if you were to type in your LinkedIn newsletter and then you have to like go off and do something, it auto saves as a draft. I'd love to say then you come back to your LinkedIn and you can see newsletter draft and you just click here. You have to kind of go around the houses again. You have to go to your home feed. You have to click on write an article. Then you go back into that back end and there is a drop down where you can click on your drafts and you can go in and you can see it. So they're always saved, which is good. But I think as an extra backup, because tech can play up, you might want to copy and paste it onto like a Word document or a Google document or even a draft email, just so you've got it. So I have a little folder set up for my LinkedIn newsletters on my desktop because I used kind of the same visual at the start of every newsletter and at the very end. And I've got pretty much the same bio at the end of, you know, so I've kind of got bits that I have ready to go to copy and paste. Sadly, the LinkedIn newsletter function is not that high tech. So I'd love to say this could all be ready to go. It's not. So I've kind of had to, you know, work my way around it. So I have like a lot of draft stuff in Google or in a draft email that I just copy and paste. But yeah, all my kind of goodies are in a separate folder for a LinkedIn newsletter, so I can quickly grab bits. But yeah, it's not very intuitive. I wish you could just go on the top menu bar and see newsletter, but you can't.
So that leads me to, I think, the final question we have for the day, everybody, which is any tips on increasing the numbers of subscribers to a LinkedIn newsletter, ways to get newly published newsletters and
Yeah.
relevant feeds? What would we say to that to close us off today?
Yeah, I just think just promote it far and wide. Like I share mine in groups, whether it's on LinkedIn or even in Facebook. You could have a link to your newsletter at the bottom of your email. You could have your LinkedIn newsletter link on your website, you know. Anytime you do a talk, you could share a link to your newsletter below. It's just about share it far and wide and don't be afraid to DM people. So if I've had people, my clients even, if I do a newsletter, I'll DM them, and it's a good way for me to catch up and say, oh, I've just written this one, I think you'll find this useful. Or it could be prospects, people I've had on sales calls, you know, I've just written this my latest newsletter last week was on how to get 5 to 20k months on LinkedIn. So I've DM'd that to a lot of people that I've had on sales calls because I know that's their goal, whether it's a 5k month or a 10k month. So yeah, don't be afraid to DM them. I know some people will be thinking, oh, it feels a bit spammy, but if you know in your heart it's a good newsletter, and I know mine are good, I don't feel bad reaching out, because especially if you've already had contact with people. So if they've been on a sales call, it's not cold outreach. They have already been to you, you know they need your help. So I would never second guess myself sending that. And then some of them result in them signing up as clients because it's kind of the nudge they need to go, yeah, actually, shit, I need your help to do this. So I'm all about warm outreach, which is why I love the events as well. So people who've come to me, you know, at an event, I wouldn't think twice about DMing them or tagging them in a newsletter. So just think, who are your existing contacts that you can get to help you share it even as well. If you've got some collaboration partners, you know, I think if you're really proud of it, you'll be happy to share it far and wide. If you're kind of going, this feels a bit ick, maybe you don't love it enough and it's not it's not as good as it could be. But I think, yeah, when you've put effort into it, you want to share it because you want people to see it. And the great thing about newsletters is they can be repurposed into shorter posts. So if there's a lot of meat in your newsletter, you can take, you know, 5 posts from it, 10 posts from it, and link back constantly to your newsletter. So yeah, I love them.
That's I think a great reminder as well. I'm going to read in between the lines for people that struggle to connect or just message new connections and you don't know and you feel, oh, should I do a randomized breaker that ChatGPT recommended me to do that feels so cringy? I think actually remembering that when you are creating this type of content or using this type of features, people will potentially do things like subscribe to the newsletter, comment on the newsletter, uh, watch a live, RSVP for an event. These are great examples of how you can then start a conversation, just as you say, DMing people to say, I think you might enjoy my newsletter since you've been at my event. A lot of the time we struggle with an ask, I think, because we don't know how to do the ask, or we feel it can feel a bit grating because it comes out of
Yeah.
nowhere. So these are actually great signals and excuses, so to speak, to actually say to people, hey, why don't you actually check me out? Why don't you actually take that next step that is quite natural because we already have connected anyway? So I think this is a great example of that. So thank you so much. Jen, I'm going to ask you to remind our people, because we're coming to time, live and dear listener, listening to the replay, where can people find out more about you? I'm going to put the LinkedIn link obviously in the show notes, in the chat,
Okay.
everywhere else. But let's give us the tea of what do we need to remember and where do we need to go?
Yeah, just find me on LinkedIn, Jen Corcoran. I'd love to connect with anyone on here today. I'm pretty old school. I'm basically LinkedIn and my email. So they're the two quickest ways to get me. My website, if people want to have a look, it's mysuperconnector.co.uk. So yeah, they're the two main. I have a YouTube channel as well if people want to see any more. And I know we were chatting about lives. That's where my lives go on and live. They live on my YouTube after. But yeah, I could do with beefing up my YouTube a bit more. So if you're feeling kind, subscribe, and then maybe I'll make a few more.
It's good. It's all positive affirmation. I'll take
Yeah.
it. Thank you so, so much, Jen. Thank you, everybody, for live or replay, wherever you joined us today in class. As always, don't forget to be kind to yourselves and others. And remember that great marketing is not just about minds, it's also about hearts. And until next time, team, thank you so much for joining us. Class is dismissed. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Gab. Thank you.